Today on Locked On Red Wings, Zadina waived and Bertuzzi is a Maple Leaf.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the Daily JAWWJ News Radio podcast. Well, Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And today's episode, guys, we're talking about the fact that Zadina got waived. Yzerman had a free agency press conference, and then we'll finish up the conversation talking about Bertuzzi's move to Toronto and possibly answer the question as to why he went to Toronto. But first, Scotty, big news of the day. I mean, you texted me in the middle of the day. I was at work, and you were just like, wow. And I was like, what?
Did not say wow, but yeah, it was an expletive is what it was.
I censored it for a good reason. And I was like, what? You're like, Zadina. And I opened Twitter, and it's like, wow, he got waived. I was expecting a trade because it was rumored all throughout the draft that Zadina was on the trading block. And we come to find out why. Apparently, Zadina had requested a trade, but no team really wanted a part of the Zadina hype train. So on waivers, and if he doesn't get picked up, he'll be with Grand Rapids. Initial thoughts, Scotty?
You know, I want to talk about Zadina, like the player and where he stands with the organization now currently. And then when we transition over into the Yzerman press conference conversation, he was asked directly about it. And I thought Yzerman actually gave a incredibly peek behind the curtain, actually very detailed answer on the situation. So we'll get to that later on. But as far as Zadina, the player goes, where he fits within this organization, why he got waived, etc. I mean, to be completely honest with you, after free agency, and we obviously yesterday's show was jam packed. We haven't had time to really do one of these yet. But for me, when I was mocking up lines and lineups and rotations, Filip Zadina was not one of the 12 forwards that I would have had dress on where the roster stands right now. And I feel like a lot of people shared that sentiment. Not that it's impossible for him to get playing time this year, even it's like that. You know what I mean? This doesn't mean that he's guaranteed 100% never going to be a Detroit Red Wing ever again. He could make the team out of camp. He could literally get optioned to Grand Rapids in July and make the team out of camp. That's a very, very feasible thing if he shows out and takes some steps forward. But last year, he was, even when he was healthy, it was not a guarantee. When everyone was healthy, rather, including him, I should say, it was not a guarantee that he was even going to get fourth line minutes. And then when he was healthy and most of the roster was still healthy, it was a lot of fourth line minutes, right? And they just went out and we talked about it. They threw out 10 contracts over the weekend. Finding a place for him is just, there really wasn't one. And obviously, I also want to make this crystal clear. There's absolutely no way that it would have been possible to trade Zadina and this be the result. Yzerman 100%, you don't do that. If it was even possible to get a 7th rounder for him, I'm sure that they would have try to work something out. So clearly no one wanted to trade for him. That doesn't mean no one will claim him on waivers necessarily, but no one wanted to trade for him, and he's getting sent down to Grand Rapids. So the biggest thing for me was it's very kind of wild instant reaction just because it's Filip Zadina, right? And he's a polarizing figure in this fan base and whatnot. But as far as when you look down the lines and look down right now where he kind of slots in, it's not the most shocking thing in the world that they didn't have room for him. And, both parties thought, well, let's see if we can maybe get you some more playing time somewhere else.
Yeah, it's kind of a bummer because I've been somebody who's been a Filip Zadina advocate.
Yeah.
I mean, all last season, unfortunately, he suffered, 2 injuries that sidelined him for quite a bit of time in the season. Only played, I think, 30 games. And it's 7 points when he did play. So it's not like he was effective when he was healthy. But he's great in transition and he's great defensively, which is funny because that's
forward.
Not the player you were advertised when you took him 6th overall. But like, I still believe in his ability to not become like a top line scorer or even like a 20 goal scorer, but to have a steady NHL career eating bottom 6 minutes. But like you said, Scotty, the runway kind of just ran out for him. When everyone's mocking up these lines, like you were saying, they have him as the 13th or 14th forward at best with the Detroit Red Wings. And that's just not enough to like have him on the roster. And especially with how full this roster is now with a healthy Michael Rasmussen, this team would have been at 24 players. Granted, they're not going to keep 3 goalies, so 23 in all reality, but it just is really a disappointment to see somebody like Filip Zadina, who was so highly regarded as a prospect, just never really put it together with the Detroit Red Wings, and to the point where he wanted out and he requested a trade. And, I'm sad, but I don't think it's wrong. I mean, he even said, fans have been saying for a long time, he might need a change of scenery. Well, apparently he agreed, because that is the sole reason why he requested a trade. He wanted to change the scenery. And then obviously, I mean, we can talk about the Yzerman part of the presser in regards to Zadina specifically right now, since we're talking about Zadina, if you want. But like, Yzerman talked about Scotty, amongst other things, like how he requested a trade and he tried his best to make it happen, but he couldn't find a partner, and how that contract that he signed, and he signed Zadina to that contract because he believed Zadina could grow still and become good. Because again, he's only 23 years old. It's not like he's 30. But that contract kind of became an albatross that held him back from getting dealt. Not that he's making a ton of money, but you're paying $1.825 million to a guy who had 7 points last year. It's hard to justify making a trade where the Red Wings get anything back to begin with, or find a team that's even interested in that. So, yeah, it just is. It kind of reached a unfortunate peak where the Red Wings just couldn't make it happen, and so this is how his tenure ends, and it's just disappointing and kind of a bummer.
Yeah, I mean, it is for sure. And you kind of mentioned the Yzerman press conference, the Zadina part of that. And yeah, like, Yzerman really drove home the point that like he still believes in Zadina. But as it stands right now, they didn't have a guaranteed starting spot for him. And Zadina kind of wanted to go somewhere where that was a possibility. And he said it's like no hard feelings. He understands. He supports the kid. He still very much believes that there's a good hockey player in there. And so we'll see what happens. The other thing is that, again, I'll reiterate what I said at the beginning. This doesn't guarantee the end of the road. It certainly makes it a lot less likely that he's gonna come here. But like Yzerman even said, he was point blank asked, like, if he clears waivers, is he just gonna like go to GR or whatever? And Yzerman was like, yeah, couldn't find a trade partner. Can't imagine I'm gonna magically find one after he goes down to Grand Rapids. If he clears waivers, he'll be on the Griffins, and he's under contract, so there's nothing either of us can do. He'll be playing for us. And so that, there's no, there was no like beat around the bush really with like all of this. It was pretty straightforward, and I really appreciated that part of the presser. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely an unfortunate situation, but I don't know, that change of scenery could just be the AHL for a little bit, and then I don't know, like I'm never expecting him to be a 30 plus goal scorer at this point at the NHL level. Probably 25 or more is probably at this point pretty unobtainable. But like I still believe I'm with you. I still believe with how well he skated and played in the neutral zone in transition, I still believe that there's at least a solid like bottom 6 forward at the NHL level in there.
Yeah, and I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't Steve Yzerman basically also say, like, as because if he goes to Grand Rapids, like the door is still there for him to continue playing with the Red Wings if he earns that spot, something along those lines?
Yeah. Well, I think I might have said something like that at the beginning too, but yeah, he literally said like he can make the team out of camp.
Yeah.
Like he could literally like he can go in and like if he goes to Grand Rapids, he'll certainly be invited to training camp.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, he will, just like everybody else that like doesn't have a guaranteed spot on the roster, will be in the mix and Yeah, he 100%. Like he he'll didn't say it was likely or whatever, but because I mean clearly this move doesn't happen if that is, but that it just the timing of having it happen on July 3rd is the part that was not alarming, but like really stood out to you, where it was like, okay, like clearly they are at an impasse here, because that's not a move that you like have to make in early July if you don't really want to.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to go through the rest of the Yzerman press conference, things that kind of stood out to us that are worthy of note, because this is a little bit more, I feel like a little bit more of a candid Steve Yzerman than we're used to seeing in this press conference. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official betting partner of Major League Baseball. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are talking about the Yzerman press conference. Now, Scotty, you were able to see it and take notes on it. I kind of half paid attention because I was at work. Well, it happened because I still had to work on Monday, unlike half the nation, apparently. Kind of take us through and tell me a little bit about what some of the most notable moments. I mean, obviously I saw on Twitter some of the things that were said, but, really walk me through that and let me know what your thoughts are, man.
Yeah, well, I think that, like you said, I appreciated the transparency throughout it. Like, we talk all the time that Yzerman's a really big, like, A, liar, B, like GM speak person sometimes. And I feel like this was really, really kind of blunt and straightforward, and I appreciated that. I think one of the first things that jumps out at me of like big moments was that he flat out admitted in front of everybody that they need more goal scoring, like still, even after the moves that he made. And I forget who asked, but one of the reporters in the room asked him, compared, we had done something similar during the playoffs when we kind of looked at, where the playoff teams are roster wise and compared and contrasted them to the Red Wings. And we had talked about the Hurricanes and the Knights specifically, and how they are like kind of the exception to the rule. And they're one of the few teams that don't have like, that elite goal scorer on it, but they have, 10, 15 dudes that can all score 10, 15 plus goals, right? And so Yzerman kind of went down that a little bit and explained, that the way that he put it actually was, he again admitted that they wanted still and needed more goal scoring at the top, but did say that one of the things that he's expecting this fall was a continued growth in goal scoring just down the roster. He says that he expects like players like Berggren to take another step forward with goal scoring. Like I think Veleno might have been cited, and just kind of like went down the line of most of the young talent kind of in that bottom six. And I mean, like even like Raymond, obviously we want to see an uptick in goal scoring from him. Like he kind of just went down the line and cited Robbie Fabry return for a full season. Like of all these guys that, like he's expecting more goals scored from them. And he did admit like there's still probably a gap between where they are currently as a roster as far as goal scoring and where they want to be. He openly admitted that there was a gap there and that they wanted to still probably get better in that department. But hearing it from him and hear like, okay, we're not losing it. Like we know that like, yes, that is a huge team need currently. And even after free agency, he is not just like, oh yeah, we got like a little bit more goal scoring down the roster, so like we're good. Like hearing him even of 24 hours after signing 10 dudes still admit they want to still improve in goal scoring was nice to hear.
Yeah, and I think that kind of touches on one of the questions that I had regarding the free agency in general as to like what's the direction, what's the plan here? Because during the draft, he spoke so much about how, this core isn't there yet, this team isn't there yet. That's why he's not making big moves, blah, blah, blah. Then he goes out and signs 10 guys and spends the most money in free agency out of any team, I believe. So it confused me. But then listening to him talk and hearing him say that, it made sense because Saturday's team is better than Friday's team. Like the signatures that he made, the acquisitions he got, made the team better, made the team deeper. And I think it's the bottom six and the bottom, two pairs on defense and bottom two pairs on defense all got better because of the signings that he made. And better equals more goals and less goals against. So like when he mentioned that, and somebody, like you said, asked about Carolina, Vegas, Seattle, blah, 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 the teams that don't have huge goal scorers, but still can make impressive runs to the playoffs and even deep into the playoffs to even host a Stanley Cup. In Vegas's case, it made more sense that could possibly be the approach that this team is taking, because you're right. They just don't have that goal scorer. So like when he said that, I was like, that makes sense. That maybe he pivoted to try and make a really deep team instead of like a high goal scoring team. But of course, like you said, still expressed that need for a goal scorer. And I believe he even said he's going to continue to try to get that goal score. So that means that while he had kicked some tires during the draft, he's not done kicking tires yet. And that is a little nice to hear that that's still something he believes the team needs.
Yeah. I think both of those points you just brought up, I think are good discussion points. I think that the part about the approach to this free agency, I think he had to play what the class allowed. There wasn't that out there.
Yes.
There wasn't a guy that you could just break the bank for and get 40 goals out of this year. There was guys like that last year, and there's going to be guys like that next year, right? Next year's free agency class is really good. So this free agency, just kind of like the ugly duckling of this like 3-year stretch of free agency classes, that's really your only option. If you were going to get better, it was going to be depth. And we had a ton of players leave that had depth roles. So like the top lines and the top pairings and the top six and whatever of this team, it did not get very much better, if better at all. But the bottom six and the bottom four got not only a little better, honestly got substantially better, at least we can say on July 3rd, right? Like I think they took major steps in the right direction there. And you have prospects that are finally ready to kind of like on the verge of making the NHL. Like I think that he kind of just had to play the cards that were dealt to him. And this summer, that was what you do. So if you look at it in more of a 2-year plan than a 1-year plan, okay, this year's free agency, there's a lot of players that can be really, really good, middle of the rotation, like solid players on a good team. So we're going to acquire all of them this summer. And then next summer, when free agency has a much better top end, like star talent class and goal scoring, obviously the arguably best goal scorer in the NHL right at the top of next year's class, then we will try to acquire that top end talent next year and kind of look at this as a I don't know, like a 20-month plan instead of a 3-month plan. You know what I mean? I think that might be the approach. And then to your point, he also, that was the next thing I was going to bring up, did say that there probably wasn't any more like top end goal scoring that was going to be out there in the free agent market, obviously, but he openly admitted that if a trade, and he said the word trade, like kind of came to fruition that would allow them to acquire a top end goal scorer, that he would absolutely entertain it and that they would continue trying throughout the rest of the summer to add goal scoring. So like, it's also, like you said, it's nice to hear that like there is still an active attempt being made, whether it's GM speak or not, throughout the rest of the summer to go bring in more top end goal scoring, because that is, I think at this point, probably the team's biggest need.
Correct. We're going to take another quick break, and when we return, we'll finish up our thoughts on the Yzerman press conference, and then we'll talk a little bit about Tyler Bertuzzi to Toronto and why maybe that happened. So stay tuned to segment 3 of Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty, what else of note stood out to you in the Yzerman press conference?
I think honestly, I think those were the big three. I mean, he talked about some of the players individually that he had that he had signed over the weekend. Obviously, talked. I mean, a couple of them, Comfer especially. I mean, clearly that was the bigger money one, but he expressed that that's somebody that they've had their eye on. He said for years. So like clearly when you're talking about like bringing in like your guy, like that's somebody that they had circled. They knew when he was going to hit free agency. They knew that they wanted him, and apparently was a really big fan of his game and his fit within the current Red Wings system. So that was kind of cool to hear. Just like, hey, they definitely didn't just pass out money for no reason. That was like Steve Yzerman's guy apparently.
About Strong too, didn't he?
Yes, yep, for sure. Talked about Ghost a little bit as well, Ghost Bear, and said that was a situation. Oh, I guess that's kind of a thing. Just talked about adding right-handed D-men in general.
He had an MO.
Right, yeah, and talked about again, like it's really refreshing to just like everything we've been kind of speculating and like giving our opinions on. It's really refreshing to hear the dude in charge be like, yes, that is correct. Obviously, we need a right-handed defenseman, and that's what we went out and tried to get. And yeah, like openly admitted, like, yeah, the Ghost Bear thing. It's a 1-year kind of prove it thing for him. And I think he even might have said something on the lines of like he probably won't be here long term just because like if he does well, he's going to get big money. But
yeah.
Like that was something that for this year that they were very willing to do, obviously. So, yeah, really nice. I think the biggest thing throughout the entire thing, I mean, we talked about it before the break there, but the biggest thing for me was just continuing to hear the especially with kind of the drama that's going around Toronto, and I guess we'll talk about that a little bit more with the Bertuzzi thing, but like they could potentially, I guess, maybe be looking to move some goal scoring. So like just hearing, like Yzerman, whether it's, a top end player like that or not, like Nylander or not, just hearing him say, we're not done trying to add goal scoring just because free agency's over and there's no one really out there right now anymore that can help in that regard. That a trade possibility is a possibility with this team for the next month or so still.
Yeah, I believe Ghost Despair himself is actually a left shot, but I think Yzerman said his usage at 5-on-5 was 50% on the right side.
Right.
He can play both sides. You have Cider, Hall, which whatever your guys' thoughts on Hall is right side defenseman at the very least, which is a huge need.
Yeah.
Ghost Despair can play right side. Sherrod can play right side. So I mean, like you have
a lot more flexibility there.
Yes, exactly.
Whether it's penciled in or not, like whether who's going to be on the right side every given night. Whatever, like I guess you can call that frustrating, but like you actually have the ability to kind of rotate through and put, play matchups maybe or whatever you want to do, whatever the numbers say on any given night.
And let's be honest, guys. I mean, as much as you might not like the whole, signing, Hall, Ghost Despair, is an upgrade over Osterley and Haig. Like that's just unfortunate. That's fact. So the defense got better. The bottom six got better. The team's better. I don't know about competing for the playoffs. We'll have to see how this team
a little more
gels.
physical too, which I appreciate. I mean, Hall we talked about, but also the trade that was made brought in some physicality. Yeah, I mean that's that'll add some chippiness to the bottom six as well. So
Christian Fischer as well.
Yeah, Fischer big time,
and he's a good PKer. I had a friend text me say that he, even though Cap Friendly had him listed as a left wing, right wing, that he actually plays center, Christian Fischer. So we'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But yeah, I think the team overall is better. I don't know about competing in the Atlantic Division and making a playoff spot unless, in year 2 of the loan, everyone fits into the system and we get a Seattle type season.
Well, but yeah, that'll be I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you're good. I'm done.
That'll be as we get closer to preseason and whatnot, I think that'll be a discussion we have more and more just about expectations, because again, the depth objectively got better. Like it's not even close. Like the middle six or bottom six of the forwards got better, and the bottom 4 defensive pairings got miles better, right? Like you objectively improved there a boatload, backup goalie as well. And so is that enough to take a really big step forward? Like, there's a lot of questions there, but I also think that for me, the biggest thing is going to be how big of a step forward does the young core actually take? If you get a much better depth performance and a much better depth production, rather, from those players throughout this season, and Sider and specifically Raymond take a big step forward in year 3, then I think you could be talking about it. But if the top 6 kind of maintains their production from last year and you're just getting better production from 3rd and 4th line, maybe not. So that'll be a conversation we definitely have as September gets closer, for sure.
Yeah, I'm trying to really quick look up the Red Wings, like their roster from the final day of the season, because I want to be like this is what your team was in that final game, and this is what your team looks like. Obviously, like injuries and trades have happened at that point, but like the final game of the season, you're looking at a situation where the Red Wings, this is the wrong team. Come on now. Stupid ESPN. Sorry, guys, trying to do things on the fly.
No, but that's really what, again, like I truly believe that this has the potential to be kind of like a 2 off season plan, and not that they have 2 off season plan like pinned on their like chalkboard or anything, but like I think that this could be a situation where like this is the pretty much, I don't want to say the best you could do, but like this was what you could address this offseason, just in the market, right? Yeah. Trades aside, and then next offseason maybe you can address the top end talent a little bit more.
I give up on the thing I was trying to do. ESPN.com was giving me fights. Point being, even without the listing names off, a lot of turnovers,
a lot of turnovers.
Better. Tyler Bertuzzi, former Red Wing, traded away at the deadline to Boston. 1-year deal to the Toronto Maple Leafs for what, $5.5 million?
Yeah, $5.5 million.
Well, that certainly didn't turn out the way he had planned.
Right.
So my question, I guess not my question, but I feel like Red Wings fans might, and I haven't seen this, so I'm assuming here, and you know what they say about assuming, but I feel like Red Wings fans might look at the contract he signed and go, why didn't the Red Wings do that? Like the Red Wings could have done that and gotten Tyler Bertuzzi back. The reason why the Red Wings didn't do that is because when the Red Wings were in conversations with Tyler Bertuzzi about a contract extension, he wanted term. And I'm talking 7-8 years.
He wanted 7 years.
Yeah, 7 years in the open market, 8 years if it was like with the Bruins who retained him or the Red Wings who would retain him. They didn't want to do that, especially for the number he wanted, which was 5.5 or north thereof. So he hit the open market. The Bruins didn't want to do it either. They wanted him on a shorter term. He didn't want the shorter term. I think it was 5 years the Bruins might have offered him. And he said, no, I want like a long-term deal. Overplayed his hand. Nobody wanted him on that term. I don't blame them, even though he has the potential to score 30 goals. He's a phenomenal playmaker who plays with a little bit of physicality, a little bit of edge, not too much physicality, but enough.
He's a stir.
He's a stir, but he was injured twice last year. He's had injury problems throughout his career. I don't blame teams for not, especially off of a season where he came off 2 broken hands, not taking him on a huge, long deal. That's a giant gamble. So by the time he realized this, and had to pivot to a short-term deal, the Boston Bruins door reportedly had already closed. They had already filled out. They got Milan Lucic, guys like that. And the door for their cap space had already closed. So he made what I think is a really smart decision and signed a 1-year deal with Toronto to bet it all next offseason because, and I think I mentioned this on yesterday's episode, Toronto, with the media market it is, it can either overhype or overhate guys. And if he's playing on a line with Austin Matthews as Austin Matthews playmaker, and he'll benefit from being with Austin Matthews, obviously, I mean, he could have a career year and absolutely secure a 7-year bag into next year's free agency. I think that pivoting to that 1-year deal and going to Toronto is a genius move for Tyler Bertuzzi's own future's sake.
Yeah, well, obviously the team you just touched on, the choice of what team to go to is obviously a big factor there. But the kicking the can down the road to next year in general is smart. The cap is going to go up again, and it's a significantly better class. So,
Yes.
like, you are talking about a market that is going to be significantly more player friendly next summer than this year. And so, yes, like a lot of people are laughing at him and you know, kind of clowning on him for this whole situation where he wanted, you know, like 7 or 8, then he was, you know, down to 5, and then now it's like 1, and you know, like whatever. He clearly that he did not have the ability to sign for that long anywhere, or else he probably would have taken it. But you're absolutely right. I think the biggest thing with him is like it's not rocket science. I'm not telling you something you don't already know. It's just, can he stay healthy? If the dude plays 80 games, I have zero doubt that playing in the top 6, even if he's not on the top line, if playing in the top 6 in Toronto, he's going to put up a phenomenal season if he plays 80 games. I have zero doubt.
I mean, his career year, 68 games played with Detroit last year, or I guess 2 years ago now, he had 62 points.
Yeah.
That was with the Red Wings. Like, if he's healthy for full 82 playing in Toronto, it's a 60-point minimum out of him. Like,
For
minimum, he ties his career high, I think.
And again,
So
like,
he's going to get paid next year.
right. And he's the kind of like, his play style is just so like teams love it. Like the players that he plays with, every single person who's ever played with Tyler Bertuzzi absolutely loves him for a reason, right? Like he does all of the dirty work that isn't flashy and whatnot. And a lot of his goals are kind of just like shove-ins in front of the net. But that when you can do that 30 times and be a really a big presence, a great playmaker, do that dirty work that, you know, some of the higher salary guys not only don't want to do, but are kind of steered away from doing. He brings so much value to any offense. And that's the other thing that's great about Bert. And we said this when he was still here. Bert's a guy that you can play on the 4th line or the 1st line, and you're going to get the exact same production. Like he fits into any personnel group, any line. It does not matter. He's phenomenal. And yeah, if he plays 80, right, he's going to get paid next offseason because it's going to be a much more player friendly market, a much more free flowing like money market. And he's probably going to put together a dang good season. It just all comes down to, can he stay healthy playing the way that he does? And that's been the question ever since he broke into the league.
Has never once played a full 82-game season. The closest he ever got was 73 games in 2019. So that's going to be...
he gets paid if he plays 75.
Right.
Like, he doesn't even need to play 82, but I mean, most of his seasons are like 65 and less. It's tough.
All right, Scotty. Any final thoughts, man?
No, we ball. I thought this was a good episode. I thought this was a fun conversation. Obviously, going forward, we'll kind of start breaking down. We'll actually kind of slowly transition into previewing this fall, which is crazy that we're
already there.
Yeah.
So we'll be back with a new episode tomorrow. Stay tuned for that. Same time, same place. See your team every day.
Every day.